Juan?
Well, Ohio is a key swing state that ended up deciding the outcome of the 2004 election. But the state was riddled with voting problems, ranging from breakdowns in electronic voting machines to accusations of widespread voter disenfranchisement.
Democrat Jennifer Brunner was elected Secretary of State in Ohio in November of 2006. She replaced Republican Kenneth Blackwell. Since then, she's faced fire from virtually every side: Republican operatives, voting machine companies, voting rights groups, and more, as she has worked to resolve some of the voting problems from 4 years ago. Most recently, the GOP asked a federal judge on Sunday to force Secretary of State Brunner to match voter registration information, such as a driver's license number, against information in the State Bureau of Motor Vehicles database. Republicans filed a complaint Sunday as an extension of a previous action against a week-long period in which Ohioans could register and vote on that same day.
Ohio Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner joins us on the telephone now. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Juan. Good morning, Amy.
It's good to have you with us. Why don't you start off by talking about what this latest controversy is, this lawsuit?
This is currently pending in the federal district court in the Southern District of Ohio in Columbus, and the judge will be hearing arguments on this morning at 11 o'clock. The Republican Party had this lawsuit in place when they were fighting what we call the overlap voting, which is when absentee voting started before the close of voter registration, which allowed people to go to an early voting site, register to vote, request an absentee ballot, and vote it on the spot. In that original lawsuit, they were denied relief first by the federal judge and then again by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. But what they did was to try to renew a motion for temporary restraining order and now push this effort. And what really concerns me is that the way these papers are pled, they're looking for a list of all the mismatches by October 12th. And this is in light of the fact that at this point in time, we are informed that the Social Security Administration will be shutting down its computers for those comparisons from the 10th to the 13th for maintenance over the holiday weekend. And they want that in time the Republican Party wants it in time to be able to file challenges 20 days before the election, to require ID, which is already required in Ohio, and also to push people into provisional voting.
Well, I'd like to ask you, you've been now Secretary of State. You replaced the infamous and controversial Kenneth Blackwell. And in the first year, you had a report called Everest that looked at the situation in the voting system of Ohio. Could you tell us about some of the main concerns that you had out of that report?
We focused on 4 areas. We focused on security, reliability of the equipment and the systems, the configuration, whether all of the systems throughout the state were configured to the same software level, and also whether or not procedures that local election officials used were mitigating some of the concerns that we found. Unfortunately, all of the equipment failed. I hate to say the word miserably, but it was a very big disappointment when we compared the equipment, which is essentially computer-based equipment, to general standards for security in the computer industry. Computers that we would use for banking, for travel, for communication, the type of security that would be required was just not engineered in this equipment. Not to say that it can't count correctly, but there were so many risks presented that we took this to the legislature, asked the legislature to fund us for all paper ballot systems throughout the state. But unfortunately, I think in part due to budget problems in Ohio, but also due to the partisan nature of how that body is operating, they were silent on providing us with any relief. So what we did instead was to move forward with a bipartisan team of election officials, devise best practices for security during every step of the voting process, and then we have required security plans from every board of elections. So we're making the best of it. In the process, we discovered that the Diebold system, as memory cards from the individual voting machines were being uploaded into the server in one county, votes were dropping. So we are in the middle of litigation against Diebold for that.
We're talking to the Secretary of State of the swing state of Ohio, Jennifer Brunner. More than 666,000 new voters have been added to the voter rolls. How are you going to deal with the numbers, the famous pictures of the past with people waiting hour after hour in the pouring rain? Of course, that's going to lead to people leaving the polling place before they vote. How are you dealing with close to 700,000 new voters?
What we did was to look at what happened in Ohio in 2004. In counties like Franklin County and Columbus, and where Kenyon College is, in Knox County, there was an inadequate number of voting machines to serve those voters. So we have given the boards of elections guidelines for what they need for the adequate distribution of voting machines, but and we've also said to the boards, you need to actually publish to the public by the middle of October how many voting machines you will have per precinct, and if you're not meeting the guidelines, explain why. But we're not leaving it there. We have 53 of our 88 counties who use the touchscreen machines, which we understand, aside from security issues, poses a straight supply and demand concern. So we have backup paper ballots in the amount of 25% of the number of people who voted in those precincts in the last presidential election. And those boards of elections using the DREs also have to provide to us a way that voters can move in two lines rather than one to sign into their poll books and opt for a paper ballot if they prefer not to vote on the electronic voting machine. We think that's going to alleviate the congestion. And in addition, this is the first time Ohio has had absentee voting for anyone who prefers to do that without any reason at all. So we're seeing record numbers of people voting early, and a conservative estimate is that 25% of Ohio's registered voters, or the number of voters voting, will have voted before Election Day.
The New York Post today has a front-page article that touches in part on situations going on in Ohio, claiming that that the group Acorn has been involved in fraudulent voter registration at apparently massive levels, according to some of their reports. What is your concern about these allegations of fraud in voter registration and people voting more than once?
We have things built into our law so that anytime someone registers, even if they register and vote on the same day, a notification card is sent to them at their address. If that card comes back, that certainly puts that registration into question. The poll book is marked, and if that person were to show up at the polling place, Ohio law now requires that Ohioans show ID, although our ID law is much more liberal than, for instance, Indiana's. So, and then also our boards of elections do enter those voter registration applications into a database that automatically is sent to the Secretary of State's database. We're connected with T1 lines. We run that, of course, through the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, who sends it on to the Social Security Administration if it can't get a match on driver's license. So we think there are some excellent safeguards built into the law. But our own experience with Acorn in Ohio is there have been some problems in the past, but the person who we work with when there are questions from Acorn is Katie Gall, who is very experienced and conscientious, and we've had nothing but good experiences working with her.
Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner, what is Ohio's laws on people who've served time in prison? This is confusing all over the country. Many who have come out of prison do not know that they actually can vote in most states. I mean, in places like Vermont, you can actually vote from prison. But what are Ohio's laws here?
In Ohio, it's very simple. If a person has been convicted of a felony, as long as they are not incarcerated on that felony, they can register and vote. Now, for instance, if they're convicted of, say, possession of cocaine, a fifth-degree felony, and they're placed on probation, they can certainly be registered and vote. If, for instance, they violate their probation and they're incarcerated on that probation